From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. Right-wing presidential candidate Ivan Duque won a clear victory in Colombia's runoff presidential election. Duque, a protege of former President Álvaro Uribe, won 54% of the vote. Left-wing candidate and former mayor of Bogotá, Gustavo Petro, got just under 42% of the vote. 41-year-old Duque will assume office in August, taking over from outgoing President Juan Manuel Santos. Duque celebrated his victory by making a call for unity in the country. The former economist and first-term senator said the peace agreements signed with the FARC in 2016 need to be modified. He also threatened to put an end to the current peace talks with the National Liberation Army, ELN, if the guerrilla group does not stop all of its activities. Duque's victory means he will become Colombia's youngest president since 1872.
First of all, the long-awaited peace deal demands corrections, and it will have corrections, so that the victims are at the center of the process, to guarantee truth, justice, reparations, and no repetition. There is no longer any room to continue encouraging confrontations and breakdowns. It is no longer a matter of Duqueism or Petroism. This is about Colombia for all of us.
On the other side, Gustavo Petro's supporters received the outcome with bittersweet feelings as they came close to a victory in a historic outcome for the Colombian left. Petro said his defeat should not spell the end of the political movement that nearly brought him to office. He promised his party will keep fighting for peace and change in Colombia by facing the new government in Congress. Petro was the first left-wing candidate in Colombia's modern history to move to a second presidential round and to win over 8 million votes.
We lived an intensely beautiful and magical moment that we won't soon forget, that will stay with us. We already know what we were capable of.
We need to continue working, because this time we were able to make the country's pork barrel politics shake. We showed the country's corrupt class that yes, it can be done.
Meanwhile, the FARC political party has called on now President-elect Ivan Duque to show good sense towards the peace agreements. Duque's victory could pose a challenge for the peace accords signed in 2016, as he has threatened to rewrite them. For that reason, the FARC has already asked for a meeting with Duque in order to discuss the continued implementation of the agreement. In his victory speech, Duque said that he would introduce corrections to the peace deal to put the focus on the victims. Let's go to our correspondent in Bogotá, Natalia Margarita, who has more on this historic election.
Over 19 million Colombians have cast their vote in a historical election process that comes as the first presidential race since a peace deal between the government and the FARC was signed in 2016. The future of this peace process was at the center of this presidential campaign, involving two candidates who represent opposing political projects.
Gustavo Petro has maintained a coherent position regarding the peace accords, defending their full implementation, promoting talks with the National Liberation Army, and asking for a ceasefire. Ivan Duque, on the other hand, follows the lead of his political mentor, Álvaro Uribe, who is even willing to completely undo the agreement.
The nearly 96,000 voting tables across the country closed at 4 p.m. local time. 1 hour later, electoral authorities announced that right-wing Ivan Duque from the political party of former President Álvaro Uribe won over progressive left-leaning candidate Gustavo Petro.
I was surprised by the outcome. We believe in the power of Petro's movement. It was an alternative to the establishment. It stood against the drug trafficking and corruption that have been polluting our system for a very long time.
Despite the final results, this is the first time in Colombia that an independent left-wing presidential candidate made it to a runoff, reaching a historical number of 8 million votes, something that for many citizens expresses the discontent towards traditional politicians, as well as the beginning of a change in the country's political culture.
In the first round, we won 5 million votes, and on Sunday, we got 8 million. We nearly doubled our results in the runoff. We are going to keep working together in this alliance, especially towards peace. Colombia achieved an important agreement, and we won't allow peace to be destroyed.
Now, the future of Colombia's peace process remains uncertain, but what is certain is that the recently elected Ivan Duque will face a broad and diverse coalition that will not give up in defending peace and social justice for the country. Natalia Margarita, Telesur, Bogotá, Colombia.
There has been widespread outrage after media reported that hundreds of immigrant children were kept in cages at a warehouse at the border in South Texas on the U.S. side. The First Lady, Melania Trump, has criticized the separation of children from their parents. Former First Lady Laura Bush has also strongly condemned it, saying it is cruel and immoral. In the last 6 weeks, 2,000 families have seen their children separated from their parents during their attempts to enter the United States. Attorney General Jeff Sessions introduced a zero-tolerance policy towards the asylum seekers in April. The United Nations Human Rights Chief has said the policy is an abuse of children and is unconscionable.
The thought that any state would seek to deter parents by inflicting such abuse on children is unconscionable. I call on the United States to immediately end the practice of forcible separation of these children, and I encourage the government to at last ratify the Convention on the Rights of the Child in order to ensure that the fundamental rights of all children, whatever their administrative status, will be at the center of all domestic laws and policies.
We'll take a short break now, but join us again after this video from our multimedia team. Welcome back. 6 people were buried in Nicaragua on Sunday, including 2 children. They were victims of a fire started by a group of hooded men on Saturday. Hundreds joined the memorial service and condemned the violence that has hit the country for almost 2 months now. The fire was started just after hours after President Daniel Ortega and opposition members met again for a dialogue and agreed to end hostilities. 2 more people were also killed during the weekend, attacked by masked criminals while removing roadblocks. Nicaragua's political crisis has left at least 178 people dead, according to unofficial figures. Talks between the government and the opposition are set to resume this Monday. Venezuela strongly condemned the use of violence for political purposes by the Nicaraguan opposition. In a press release published by the foreign minister, the government regretted that there were deaths over the weekend and called on international bodies and foreign countries to contribute to peace in Nicaragua. Venezuela has announced it will not take part in the process presented by the government of Guyana at the International Court of Justice in The Hague to consider its territorial dispute over the Essequibo region. In a statement, the Venezuelan Foreign Ministry said the court lacks jurisdiction over an action presented unilaterally without the consent of Venezuela. Guyana Essequibo is a territory administered by Guyana and claimed by Venezuela. In 1966, the United Kingdom, Venezuela, and British Guyana agreed to find a practical, peaceful, and satisfactory solution to the dispute through a good offices mechanism. Venezuela insists this remains the right approach. The Bolivian President Evo Morales is in China, where he's been visiting companies interested in investing in Bolivia. Our correspondent in Beijing, Isaura Diaz, has the details.
Economic cooperation is at the top of the agenda for President Evo Morales on his 2-day visit here in China. According to public media in Bolivia, Morales is expecting to sign 7 agreements dealing with areas like infrastructure, trade and security. They say Bolivia and China have pledged $1.8 billion to boost investment in infrastructure and the export of quinoa and coffee. On Tuesday, Evo Morales will meet with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in the People's Palace here in Beijing, where the two are expected to sign these cooperation agreements. The Bolivian president is also scheduled to meet the president of the National People's Assembly, as well as businessmen, governors of several Chinese regions and executives of the State Development Bank. This is Morales' 4th trip to China, where he arrived after visiting Russia and The Hague.
Was Isaura Diaz from Beijing. A 5.6 magnitude earthquake hit Guatemala on Sunday as the country recovers from the devastating effects of the Fuego volcano that erupted more than 2 weeks ago. Disaster officials said the quake was located at a depth of 100 kilometers, about 67 kilometers southwest of Guatemala City. Authorities said there are no reports of damages. Officials also called off the search for nearly 200 people missing since the Fuego volcano erupted, damaging the surrounding countryside. The Civil Protection Agency said the rescue services involved decided to end the search because the area is inhabitable and of high risk. More than 3,600 villagers have been forced to take temporary shelter in schools and community halls. In El Salvador, social and environmentalist organizations, together with the Catholic Church, are opposing the privatization of water ahead of signs that the right-wing parliament plans to change the water laws. Our correspondent Ernesto Avalos reports.
The Episcopal Salvador Conference sees strong, widespread complaints regarding the privatization of water. People demand a nationwide water law that guarantees this fundamental human right.
We are a country that's investing in strong efforts to privatize water. How painful, what a shame. The interest that we have is in the common good and, of course, to defend the rights of the people, the most poor and vulnerable.
The privatization of water gives control, rights, resources to private companies. The Water Forum, made up of environmental and civil society, denounced the mass use of water and the contamination of rivers and water sources.
We have sectors such as the pipeline industry, which appropriate water with dams, contaminate rivers, and perpetuate deforestation. Without a doubt, companies like these are trying to make decisions about how water is managed in this country, which goes against the human right of access to water.
In the last 12 years of fighting for a national water law, 92 articles have been approved, and now these articles are being repealed by the new legislators
The FMLN political party denounces the process of privatizing water and believes the following. High concern for the decision made by the right wing on June 5 in the Environment and Climate Change Commission, who validated the majority decision. They argued the integral water law was made by the private sector.
The proposal from the right wing gave the International Environmental Day reason for concern over political privatization in favor of excessive capital. As El Salvador legislators continue to debate on a national water law, bishops are urging people to voice their right to be heard on this issue.
The Caribbean Confederation of Credit Unions is organizing its 61st annual international convention in Port of Spain in Trinidad and Tobago. The group, established in 1972, serves as the apex trade and development organization for financial and non-financial cooperatives in the Caribbean. Antigua and Barbuda, Jamaica, Barbados, and Trinidad and Tobago are among the 18 members from the region. Speaking at the opening ceremony, Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Keith Rowley, said the union has the power to change the future of credit services in the area.
While the mandate of the Cooperative Development Division includes promoting cooperatives as viable business enterprises and creating an enabling environment to contribute towards the socio-economic development of its members, it is clear that the credit union movement has substantially outgrown its space and has now established itself as a worthy contender among the most highly regarded and respected families of financial institutions worldwide.
In the first match of the day at the Russia World Cup, Sweden has beaten South Korea 1-0. Sweden went ahead when Andreas Granqvist put away a penalty in the 65th minute. Belgium is currently facing Panama, and England will play against Tunisia later today. Former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva will become a commentator for the World Cup. Our correspondent André Vieira has the details.
Incarcerated former leader and current presidential frontrunner Lula da Silva has been hired as a sports commentator for the World Cup. This curious act of programming starts now, with Lula commenting through written letters from his jail cell on selected games. In the first game, Brazil tied 1-1 in their debut in the Russian World Cup 2018. We were here accompanying some Brazilians, and they are true football fanatics. They're continuously following the games, and they've tasted success. Starting Monday, Lula da Silva will provide his perspective via written notes to be taken and read aloud on VTV. Meanwhile, fans are sending good vibes for the World Cup selection. They're also demanding that Lula be freed, voicing the need for liberty for the ex-president, which Lula himself is seeking by acting as a commentator in this program. Football and politics have particularly strong ties at this current moment in Brazil.
André Vieira from Brazil. So the country, Brazil, only managed a draw in the first match against Switzerland in the World Cup, but their fans are optimistic, despite the country's current political and economic troubles. Let's go to our correspondent Mia Alberti from Sao Paulo.
The World Cup has officially started here in Brazil, and although the political and economic crisis have dampened the excitement of previous years, the feeling here is still very optimistic.
We have a very good team. We won the Olympics and we are going to win strongly this year.
Brazil will be the champion, France will come second and Portugal third.
Brazil was named the most likely team to win, according to The Economist magazine. The group is led by coach Tite and captain Marcelo, but it's also relying on Neymar's talents. Despite a serious back and ankle injury 4 months ago, the 26-year-old star is back on the field. This World Cup will be missing one of the greatest. 77-year-old football legend Pelé won't be attending the games in Russia due to health issues. Brazil has tied its first game against Switzerland, but it still has to face Costa Rica and Serbia to move on to the round of 16. The loss against Germany in 2014 is still very present in the Brazilians' mind, but this year one thing is certain, the eye it's on the prize. Mi Alberti, Telesur in São Paulo.
Football fans set off earthquake sensors in Mexico while celebrating their national team's victory against Germany on Sunday. Fans jumping after Mexico's goal shook the ground hard enough to set off earthquake detectors. According to the Institute of Geological and Atmospheric Investigations, the artificial quake occurred at 2 sites in capital city, Mexico, the capital, Mexico City, 7 seconds after Mexicans cheered Hervin Lozano's score. Fans celebrated Mexico's victory by singing Cielito Lindo, the traditional song transformed into an unofficial anthem. We'll take one last short break, but join us after this video from our multimedia team.
¿Cómo lo vio Uruguay?
Y yo lo vi a Uruguay un poco lento en transición. O sea, Cavani y Suárez tuvieron que hacer un trabajo doble de recibir, de darse vuelta, de mirar. Muy bien el equipo de
Cooper.
Cooper, porque
muy buen repliegue.
Exacto, eso es lo que le pedimos a Argentina.
Fue un buen partido, me parece, 2 equipos sólidos.
A mí me pareció,
partido de mundial.
A mí me parece que empezó el mundial con Uruguay-Egipto. Me parece que Uruguay, al margen del resultado de hoy, que fue al minuto 90, creo que Uruguay es de temer. Tenemos el debut de Perú. Y bueno, Perú después de 36 años.
Lo importante es que mañana está Guerrero.
Lo importante es que Gareca cuenta con Guerrero.
Y todo el equipo seguramente.
Exacto. Y el respaldo que le puede dar Guerrero, porque Guerrero no solamente es el líder, es el que mantiene la pelota arriba. Y con Dinamarca, que los daneses hacen todo a 1000 por hora, cuidado.
Y aparece Argentina.
Con una incógnita bárbara. ¿Por qué dejaron a Chiquito Romero afuera? Era tranquilamente esperarlo a Chiquito a que se ponga bien durante el Mundial y dejarlo como tercer arquero. Uno ya sabemos que está en un nivel excepcional como Lío. Y el otro el Kun, que el Kun está ahí pisándole los talones a Messi, pero todavía no explotó. Entonces, esta es la gran oportunidad del Kun.
Thanks for joining us again. 3 people were killed and over 200 injured after a 6.1 magnitude earthquake hit the Japanese city of Osaka. An 80-year-old man and a 9-year-old girl were crushed by collapsing concrete walls as people headed to work and school. Another man in his 80s was crushed to death by a toppling bookcase. Some hospitals were forced to evacuate patients to other regions. The city was brought to a standstill as factory lines and bullet trains were stopped. The government issued a warning of strong aftershocks hitting the affected areas in the coming weeks. Flights in and out of Osaka have also been delayed or cancelled. The Israeli Defense Force says they have hit Hamas targets in Gaza. Let's take a look at that story and others from around the world.
The northern Gaza Strip was bombed by Israeli warplanes targeting Hamas on Monday. The Israeli Defense Force said the airstrikes were in response to incendiary kites being sent into their territory. The army failed to confirm whether there had been any civilian casualties, but said that 2 Hamas military sites and a munition manufacturing site had been hit. However, a witness whose house was damaged after the Israeli military shelled Gaza recalled the moment her home was attacked in the Al-Sudaniya area. Although there were no reported casualties, the owner of the house said her family was terrified and pleaded that they just want to live.
Every time the same thing happens to us, the glass breaks in our house, the neighbours and their neighbours. No house here is safe from destruction. What is our fault? We want safe homes. We have pregnant women, sick people, children, elders and women. What did we do so that they horrify us this way in the middle of the night?
Britain plans to inject money into the National Health Service from savings generated by leaving the European Union, the British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson said on Monday. While on a visit to the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, Johnson dismissed the idea that many people thought relying on a Brexit dividend was nonsense. However, when asked whether budget cuts would need to be made or taxes would be raised, he declined to comment, although he did say that Brexit would be good for the UK. Protests in Macedonia broke out over a name change deal with Greece. Under the new deal, Macedonia would be renamed the Republic of North Macedonia. However, the proposal hasn't gone down well with the public, who gathered in front of the parliament to decry the change. Tear gas and shock bombs were used to disperse them.
9 days after their strenuous journey at sea, over 600 migrants reached on Sunday the port city of Valencia in Spain, after Italy and Malta refused to take them in. Spain offered to accept the migrants from 25 countries, mainly from sub-Saharan Africa. Among them are 100 unaccompanied children and 80 women. France has also said it will take some of them, and many Spanish regions have offered shelters. The fate of these groups of migrants opened a fierce debate in Europe over how to handle immigration. And just before we go, a reminder that you can watch our special World Cup program with Diego Armando Maradona. De la mano del 10, the World Cup according to Maradona will air only on Telesur every night at these times, daily during the World Cup in Russia, so be sure to tune in. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief. But as you know, this and other stories you can find on our website, telesurtv.net/English. And be sure to follow us also on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.